Where did language come from? How did humans come to possess this amazing ability that no other species on Earth, not even our closest genetic relatives in the animal kingdom, have? Since the beginnings of recorded history, people have been asking themselves this question, and it is only in the recent decades that we have begun to find more or less definitive answers to it. In this lecture, we will explore some of the beliefs humans have held over millennia about the origins of language and look at the early ideas about it, as well as at the modern scientific theories. How human languages began has been a matter of debate among the intellectually curious humans for centuries. Scientists today agree that language is a result of a millennia-long evolutionary process that allowed our species, Homo sapiens, to develop physical and neurological traits which made it capable of using language. And what an amazing development it was. Human language, no matter who speaks it and where, can express ideas on an unlimited number of topics. We can talk about very concrete things such as food or tools, or the most abstract things such as time or emotions or even religion. Every human language contains hundreds of thousands of words that are made up of only a few dozen sounds. We can talk about things that are real or imaginary, things that are present right now and things that are absent, things that exist in the present time, existed in the past, or will exist in the future, and so on. No other animal species has such a complex communication system. Not even animals that are closest to us in genetic composition, such as chimps, or animals that have other very complex communication systems, such as whales or dolphins. Yet, even with the recent developments in technology, it is hard to pinpoint when exactly this development happened, or how exactly it came into existence. This is quite natural, of course, because spoken language is fleeting and impermanent. Speech, whether verbal or gestural, leaves no fossils. Once you say something, it is no longer retrievable, at least not without modern recording technology. And even today, when you can walk around and record every minute of your interactions with others on your phone, we don't do that in the regular course of our lives. Thus, there exists no hard, concrete evidence of first language use. You might say, but what about writing? Writing can be preserved for posterity and it documents language. Of course, you'll be absolutely right. But the earliest documented writing systems appeared only about 6,000 years ago. And when they did, they reflected already fully existing complex languages. They told stories, registered financial accounts, communicated business and personal affairs, and so on. In other words, they were fixed records of the ephemeral spoken language, which likely existed for countless millennia before some enterprising ancient Sumerian invented a way to capture the gist of spoken words on clay tablets. But just because hard evidence of first spoken language does not and cannot exist, it does not mean the spoken language itself did not exist. Absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Moreover, we do have indirect archaeological and paleontological evidence of the physiological and neural developments in hominids that eventually, over the course of human evolution, made language possible. Scientists from many fields, including psychology, anthropology, archaeology, and of course linguistics, combine their expertise to try and find out how human languages began. The first ideas about the origins of language were not scientific, however. Every ancient culture had its own creation myths as part of their religious beliefs. These myths detailed both the origins of the peoples and the origins of their languages and cultures. We cannot cover the fascinating mythology of every single culture, of course, so let's focus on just a few. Let's start with the Abrahamic tradition, which includes three of the world's major contemporary religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The sacred texts of each of these religions state that God created humans with an innate capacity for language, and the first human God created, Adam, gave names to all things around him. The Judeo-Christian holy books also provide an account explaining from the religious point of view why humans speak multiple, mutually unintelligible languages. The book of Genesis tells us the story of the Tower of Babel, which humans attempted to build so that they could reach heaven. God punished the builders for their arrogance. He destroyed the tower and mixed up their languages so they could no longer communicate with each other. Although the Quran, one of the holy books of Islam, does not provide the same details as Genesis, it does briefly mention the same ambitious tower construction project. Of course, many ancient cultures existed prior to the first Abrahamic religion, which was Judaism. The earliest Judaic texts date to possibly as long as 3,500 years ago. These cultures that existed prior to Judaism, to recorded Judaic texts, had their own beliefs about language. So let's start with ancient Egyptians. Ancient Egyptians believed that the god Thoth invented writing so that he could serve as a scribe to other gods. In the Hindu tradition, the Vedic goddess Vak was the personification of speech itself. According to the earliest books of Rig Veda, dating to almost 4,000 years ago, Vak represented the first utterances. She also entered poets and visionaries, inspiring them. She was described as the mother of Vedas, ancient Hindu texts of wisdom. In the Norse mythology, pagan, pre-Christian Norse mythology, humans were created by the three divine brothers, the sons of the proto-gods and giants Bor and Besla. They were Odin, Vili, and Ve. Ve was the one responsible for giving humans speech and hearing. Not only did humans try to explain the existence of the language from their earliest history, but they also tried to figure out if there was one original first language, and if yes, what it was. So from the earliest times, they tried to conduct experiments. Usually those experiments were conducted by the powerful rulers who had unlimited control over their subjects and no concern for the well-being of their subjects. They usually consisted of trying to isolate a newborn baby and from other humans and trying to see what will happen. Of course, today we consider these experiments impossible because they involve unspeakable cruelty, but in ancient times that wasn't a concern. The earliest quote-unquote research into the original language was reported by the Greek historian Herodotus around 429 BCE, that is before current era. According to Herodotus, the Egyptian pharaoh Psammetichus, who lived in the 7th century BCE, ordered 2 infants to be raised by a shepherd who was either mute or forbidden to speak to the children. They were raised in a remote area without access to any other people. After 2 years, the baby started to speak, supposedly spontaneously producing the Phrygian word for bread. Psammetichus concluded that the capacity for language was innate and that the original language was Phrygian, with all other languages developing from it. A similar experiment was conducted more than 2,000 later by King James IV of Scotland. King James was very much interested in the sciences, but the sciences of the time were understandably not what they are today, and human well-being was not considered during experimentation. In 1493, King James marooned 2 newborn babies on an isolated island of Inchkeith with a deaf and mute woman that was supposed to take care of them. His idea was that children would be raised in silence until they were ready to speak, old enough to speak, and at that point they will start speaking the original human language. Nothing is known about the fate of the woman and children for certain, because no records were either made or they did not survive into our time. But nearly 100 years after the experiment, the 16th century Scottish historian Robert Lindsay reported that some people claimed that the babies started speaking Hebrew spontaneously. Lindsay, however, was cautious to say that he had no evidence to support his claim, which was essentially a third-hand claim. It is clear from these so-called experiments that the people who conducted them jumped to the conclusion that the oldest, most respected language they could possibly think of, was the original human language. But what that language was varied depending on the social and historical situation. So let us now turn to lecture 1.2 and move on to the scientific evidence for the origin of human language. But first, a short quiz.